Hello and welcome back once again to the Single Malt Review as we tumble into the new year, bringing you all kinds of malty goodness, and this one not to be excluded. What have we got today?
Well, I feel like I've been saying these words a lot, but it's a Speyside classic. Glenfarclas, 12-year-old, exclusively sherry matured, a very rich, robust, dark colour, but completely natural colour too. No artificial colours here.
Slightly rare instance here of one that has been uncoloured but chill filtered. So it's got, I guess you'd call it halfway there. I suspect it's just too low a strength at 43 to sustain unchill filtration without going a bit funny on the shelf. So that's why we've got the one but not the other. So still good to see it free of colouring. It means we can make a much better designation on it. But yeah, never mind.
We've looked at Glenfarclas in the past, but never this particularly predominant expression. The 12-year-old is, I said the word before, it's a classic. And very, very abundant, hence the giant, mighty 1 litre bottle.
Yes, indeed. No, 1 litres of Glenfarclas 12-year-old grace airport duty-free shelves the world over. So it's probably, though maybe not among malt whisky aficionados, it might not be the most prevalent in terms of their production worldwide. It definitely probably is the heavy hitter there. And I think it's well worth a look because though whisky snobs like ourselves are probably a bit more interested in the certainly sublime older Glenfarclases and the more interesting stuff like Family Cask, which we have an old video of a rather good Family Cask there. There's plenty of younger Glenfarclas floating around, and there really is nothing wrong with it. And this 12-year-old Glenfarclas, though they do a 10, I think the 12-year-old is where Glenfarclas really begins, especially as a sherried whisky. I think it's my personal belief that all sherried whisky has a minimum age it needs to reach before it really becomes what it wants to be. Not the same with bourbon maturation. I think that supports younger whiskies. I think sherry needs to attain a certain age before it becomes really, really properly drinkable. And I think 12-year-old is where Glenfarclas hits that mark. I think a lot of people would say it's the 15 where that happens, but I think we'll attempt to challenge that because I think there's nothing wrong with the 12-year-old.
I would have to disagree with you, at least in part, on that. I'm a big fan of exclusively sherry matured whisky. Fortified wine maturation or finishes generally float my boat. And we've had some younger sherried whiskies before, and I've enjoyed them a great deal.
I suppose I would have one caveat to that, which was if you're talking about peated whiskies.
Oh, yeah.
Then it's probably a slightly different thing. For unpeated whiskey like this, I firmly believe, at least myself, that it's just awful harsh up until it isn't. And it's usually between 10 and 15 years old where that barrier is crossed for me. But I mean, that's as with a great many things in the world of whiskey. It's a personal taste thing for everybody. I certainly know that not everybody shares it because an awful lot of Glenfarclas included young sherry matured whiskey is moved by the tanker load in other regions which aren't quite so interested in numbers on the bottle. A lot of unaged Glenfarclas and other such whiskies like Arbelure, other sherry-dominant whiskies, are moved in France, particularly have a taste for young, keen, sherry-aged whiskies. So,
besides, if everyone had the same opinion on whiskey, shows like this would be completely pointless.
No fun at all. Yes. So, as for what we've got right here, it's not typical Glenfarclas. It'll be typical Glenfarclas in about 3 years once it's the 15-year-old expression. And I think that's where some people maybe wrongly say that that's where Glenfarclas becomes good. I think that's when Glenfarclas becomes archetypical Glenfarclas, but I think it's perfectly good at 12 years old. It's just a little bit different from the Glenfarclas style that people are used to. This is a little more akin to the Glenfarclas 105, which is their cask strength
which
expression, which, though it doesn't claim anymore, it's near as damn it a 10-year-old whiskey. So This is maybe more of a gentle version of that. And no one complains about 105. It's possibly still the most popular cask strength whiskey on the market.
It was one of the trailblazers in that particular
It absolutely was.
niche whiskey
So
genre.
if you think about that, then I think there's nothing stopping this from being a real Glenfarclas. It's just a little bit of a different thing. So what is it?
That is a good, hard-hitting upfront nose of, I'm thinking grapefruit marmalade on crusty toasted bread.
It's very, very Speyside, but it's a sherry nuanced Speyside, as it was always going to be for a distillery which works with 100% sherry casks. They're always going to provide a slightly darker, slightly riper, redder slant on your typical Speyside flavours.
And that colour matches the aroma nicely, that natural, very deep, nearly orange amber hue.
So this one has ripe red apples. It has some stone fruit. But it also has all these things you'd expect from sherry. It has dried peel. It has just a little bit of whiskey-soaked fruitcake. A little bit of glaced cherry. Quite a lot of just subtly honeyed nuts and currant for me on the nose. More sherry dominant than you might think on first glance.
Lots of preserved fruit and like the marmalade impressions I got at first, speaking to that.
And on the palate.
Ooh, that's warm and prickly. Lots of sherry-soaked fruit pudding. A splash of a brandy-like alcohol bite.
It's quite fresh. It's quite fiery. Glenfarclas does not age rapidly. And I think that's probably due to the fact that it, by and large, ages in a prevalence of larger butts rather than smaller hogsheads. It certainly ages in a lot of hogsheads, but it doesn't have quite the prevalence of small barrels that a distillery which aged on bourbon would tend to possess. So I think Glenfarclas ages slowly compared to some other distilleries, which isn't a bad thing. It just means you get a different evolution of flavours.
Yeah, that's a definite fieriness, which I'd expect from a younger whiskey normally. It's reminding me a bit of the Glendronach Heerlen, the 8-year-old we've tried in the past, which has a distinctly flamey spiciness to it. So in this case, it's less of that young spirit flavour, but some of that young spirit bite.
On the palate, there is quite a sweet, spirituous quality, a little bit of sweet acetone, model glue, but quite a good juicy orange citrus to go along with it. Orange citrus, orange peel, orange oil, and all very, very ripe. And the wood is quite evident here. I think with their 12-year-old, because they know it's being bottled sooner rather than later, they can take more risks with more active wood. If you know you've got a whiskey destined to become 25, 30, 40 years old, which is not uncommon in today's market, you don't want to pencil off one of those barrels with anything close to a first fill, because it will go completely insane. And we've seen some of these insane whiskies in earlier videos. You want it to be in wood, which it will age gracefully in. You don't want the cask to take over, so you wouldn't want to consign anything too exciting to it for the risk of it becoming some sort of inky, dark, sherry explosion by the time it was, say, 19 years old. And then you have to bottle it in a panic and you end up with some weird special release that you can't even sell. This, when it's 12 years old, you can take, I think, far more, maybe not even risks, but you can take a more experimental sort of cavalier approach to what casks you want to fill it into. So I think there's a lot more sort of first fill, a lot more second fill, a lot more lively, active sherry oak in here, and that's really coming through.
I've added a decent slug of water here, so I'm going to see what's happening. And hey, there come some of those more classic Speyside, dry or waxy fruit notes. You were picking apples before. I'm finally getting that now after adding some water. Apple peel, maybe a hint of pear and some orange zest.
Absolutely. A little bit of There's pear in the background, but it's just quite dominated by these
Lady apple.
almost overripe red-skinned apples. Sort of an old-fashioned red apple.
Oh, and there, that prickle has almost entirely gone from the palate. There's still strength and backbone to it, but it's got a big wallop of honey.
It really did love that bit of water.
A whole lot of dried fruit and some nuts. So yeah, Christmas cake or Christmas pudding.
No, that was quite transformative. Bringing that down to more of a 40, maybe even a 38, 35 in my case, percent. That's really increased the juice on that one, and I think that was wholly beneficial. There is, as Dave said, there's waxy qualities to it now. The fruit is a bit more evident. The spirit has been brought to heel just slightly, such that these riper qualities are coming in over the top of it. And on the palate with that water, there's a real flowing, mouth-watering juiciness to it now. The acid, which was sort of eclipsed by the youthful, fiery spirit previously, is really showing itself now, and there's a distinctly mouth-watering quality to it that wasn't there before.
And by diluting away some of those sort of more youthful whiskey properties, what we're left with, at least to my taste, is something that's more of a kind of distinctly Glenfarclas experience, like the distilled essence of Glenfarclas whiskey. It's a very quintessential Glenfarclas, almost quintessential Speyside now.
That really is rather good. Not to take anything away from older Glenfarclases, which are, well, so-called some of the finest whiskey in the world, which I almost would tend to agree on some of them. Glenfarclas, particularly old Glenfarclas, ages in such a beguiling way, like almost no other whiskey. But doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it at a young age, and this is a really good example of that. Considering it's one of the cheaper 12-year-olds on the market for a single malt, it's really good value, I think, from an independent company that does and has done things their own way for almost as long as they've existed after they got free of the old Patterson's days, which is entirely another story, but you can do your own.
Don't even know that one.
There's a parrot involved. It's a real hoot, but never mind. Whiskey historians will know what I'm talking about, and if you don't, look it up. It's a good story. Patterson's is best. Anyway, this has been the Single Malt Review. Oh, we didn't do the scores.
We didn't do scores.
Goodness me, can you tell it's the fourth whiskey of the day? I can. Let's do the scores. I think I'm going to give this one an 83. It's really solid for a 12-year-old whiskey, especially where it's priced. What do you think?
Well, because of my general preference for sherried whiskies, especially very heavily sherried whiskies, the sweeter end of the spectrum, I'm going up for an 88. This is just great. It's a very well-rounded Speyside whiskey. It's a very quintessential Glenfarclas whiskey. It's young enough to have all those vibrant characters, but mature enough to have lots of the complexity, the richness, and the depth.
No, it's a hell of a dram by Glenfarclas, and it's one that I think, even if you think you're a fan of older Glenfarclas whiskies, just see where Glenfarclas begins, even if you think you're a fan of where it ends, because you'll save a lot of money for one thing, and you'll be able to find it almost anywhere in the world.
And the sheer abundance of it means it's usually accessibly priced too. It's a good accessible 12-year-old.
You can find this anywhere.
On the quality, though.
Next time you're getting on and off an airplane, easy recommendation. Pick up one of the big bottles. You can enjoy a bit more of it as we this afternoon. At any rate, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of the Single Malt Review. We are Tim and Dave. Give us a wee subscribe if you like. You never know. But keep safe, whatever you do. Slanger, we'll be right back with something else.